everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I want to ask you to please remember to like and share these videos if you enjoy what I do, and so others can also find them. And also, please remember to subscribe to the channel. And make sure you click that little notification bell so you can be notified of my next uploaded videos. Today, we're going to travel to the country of Madagascar, which sits on the eastern shores of Africa, right across the channel from Mozambique. In the 1800s, Madagascar was the center of a tussle between France and Britain. The French wanted Madagascar because they wanted to make it a territory. The British wanted Madagascar because they wanted to utilize it as a port along their trade route to India. It was a beneficial location for them. And both British and French were on the island trying to take control and make it their own territory. But what they didn't plan on was a queen coming into power who would prove to be someone that they could not control and they could not defeat. We're going to learn about Queen Ranavalona I today. Queen Ranavalona was originally known as Princess Ramavo. She was born in 1778 in the Marina Kingdom to Prince Andriance Abominajaka and Princess Rabamadan Andriantopo. As a child, her father warned the king of the Kingdom of Marina, which we know as Madagascar today, that there was a plot against his life. That plot was by the king's very own uncle to assassinate him. The king was able to squash this plot against his life, and to pay back the family of Princess Ramavo for saving his life, he betrothed his son, Prince Radama, to Princess Ramavo. And the promise was that any child born from this union would be heir to the throne. So Princess Ramavo became the wife of Prince Ramada. But unfortunately, the prince did not prefer her among his various wives. He had 12 wives. She was the number one wife, but she was not his preference, and no children came from this union. She found herself in a loveless marriage, and so she did a lot of socializing within the court. She became very good friends with general and some of the military. And as the king of Marina died in 1810, her husband, Prince Radama, became the king. Now King Radama, he was in charge and he ruled until his death on July 27th, 1828. Now, because he died without an heir to the throne, according to their custom, King Radama's eldest sister's son, whose name was Rakatobi, was to ascend to the throne. But Queen Ramavo had other plans. She staked claim to the throne, and with support of a high-ranking military officer whom she became good friends with over the previous years, and others, Queen Ramavo had backing for her claim. So her supporters hid her in a safe location as they went out to gather more support from judges and power brokers. Then the officers rallied the army behind Queen Ramavo, and she declared herself successor to King Radama on August 11th, 1828. She claimed that King Radama decreed it so that she would be his heir to the throne. And she did this so that there would be no resistance to her staking the claim to the throne. So she successfully overthrew the kingdom, and the coronation ceremony for the new queen was on June 12th, 1829. And on August 4th of 1829, she took the throne and became Queen Ranavalona I. You see, it is their tradition that once you take the throne, that you give yourself a new name. And so that is the name she chose for herself. And this now makes her the first female sovereign of the kingdom of Imerina. During her coronation ceremony, Ranavalona stated to her people, "Never say she is only a feeble and ignorant woman. How can she rule such a vast empire? I will rule here to the good fortune of my people and the glory of my name. I will worship no gods but those of my ancestors. The ocean shall be the boundary of my realm, and I will not see the thickness of one hair of my realm." Now that Queen Ranavalona has taken the throne, she set out to get rid of her enemies and those who could stake claim to the throne. One in particular was the nephew of her husband. That was Prince Rakatobi, the son of his eldest sister. He was the rightful heir to the throne, and she had him assassinated. She starved his mother to death, and she made sure that there were no people left who could stake claim to the throne or come behind her to take her life. Now, a lot of people say at this point of the story that she was a murderous queen because she took the throne and she went on a murder spree. But when her husband took the throne, he as well eliminated some enemies and those he felt could come behind him and stake claim to the throne. So she actually did not commit an act that is unique to her in that country, because her husband did the same thing when he took rule. But the history books paint her as bloodthirsty and going on a murderous spree. But there's more to this story than just her taking their life because they were able to stake claim to the throne. Now, the agreement that was made with the king when he betrothed her to his son as a thank you to her father for saving his life was that a child from their union would be heir to the throne. Now, it stated that that promise was left open, and just a child that came from her would be left to be heir for the throne, without specifying that it had to be from her husband. That's important because keep note that she took the throne in August of 1829, and she delivered her son on September 23rd, 1829, which means she was pregnant at the time she took the throne, and we know that this child was not her husband, the former king. So that means that she did not just go on a murderous spree for the sake of it. She also did this in protection of her life and the life of the child that she was about to give birth to. There is speculation as to who the father of her child is. Possibly the general who backed her in becoming queen, or someone else in the royal court. We don't know. There's just a lot of speculation. But one other thing that Queen Ranavalona had to deal with once she took the throne was also the fact that in 1829, a fleet of 6 French ships launched an unprovoked attack on the fort of Foul Point and the nearby town of Ivandro on the east coast of Madagascar. With the change in rulership, the French felt that this was possibly a good time to try and take control. Also, possibly because they felt maybe this new ruler, was weak, or they were not feeling that the country had enough power in this time of change. Nonetheless, they did a sneak attack on the eastern portion of the country, and the end result was not well for them, because once they attacked the Fort of Foul Point, they then went to the nearby town of Ivandro and attacked. And they had some success in both of those attacks. They then moved on to the next port. When they got there, the Queen had troops there waiting for them. There was a small battle that ensued, and her troops defeated the French, and they forced the French to flee to the nearby island of Sainte Marie. There, the French were stuck for a little while, and they suffered more casualties once at Sainte Marie due to malaria. They had a good number of their troops who died from malaria. So the French were forced to withdraw and go back to France. So basically, they left with their tails tucked between their legs. And it is said that those who were left behind, who died in the battle, that their heads were removed from their body, placed on a stake, and placed on the beach facing the ocean as a warning to anyone else who dared come along and challenge her. So it was basically a come and try me if you want to message. Now, after taking the throne and having to deal with some of these big events immediately after becoming queen, she could now get into the business of politics. And around October of 1829, she started addressing some of their foreign political issues. For example, she annulled the Anglo-Marina Treaty, and she refused to continue receiving annual payments from Britain in exchange for adhering to the stipulations of the treaty. Now, her husband was very pro-European, and he really wanted to bring them into the country, which is why they were there, and have this relationship with them. And he really wanted to be a part of the European community. So he and his father as well before him went into these agreements with the British. The slave trade, the international slave trade, was a big source of income for their country. But one of the stipulations that they did have put into this treaty was that there was going to be a non-participation in the international slave trade for them. So when she annulled this treaty with them, that being a part of it, also they received weapons from Europe. And so upon termination of the treaty, that was also the end of the delivery of modern weaponry, which made them vulnerable to enemies like France. In 1832, a Frenchman named Jean Laborde was shipwrecked off of the island of Madagascar. This forced him to have to spend some time on the island, and it came to the Queen's attention that he was present and that he was knowledgeable in the production of gunpowder, muskets, and cannons. So the Queen met with him, and they became pretty friendly, and they came to an agreement where she would provide him with materials and labor to establish factories that could meet the needs of her army. So this ended the kingdom's dependence on Europe for modern weaponry. So now basically at this point, they are no longer in any kind of agreement with the British. They have completely separated themselves from Europe, not depending on them in any aspect. And while they did still have to conduct trade, and there was some effect on the country, she did find other ways to bring uh, buffalo, rice, things like that into the country for the people to have as food and other supplies. So she did find other means to provide for the country. In May of 1857, a coup d'etat against the queen began, and it was backed by the Europeans. And the plan was to dethrone the queen on June 20th. And her son, Prince Riccardo, was behind this and in support of it as well. He was a major player. Now, it is not for sure of the details of how she learned about the plot, but the queen did learn of the plot, and she allowed it to unfold in order to ascertain the loyalties of her government members. After discovering the plot and those involved, the Europeans who were on the island were confined to their houses on the palace grounds and prohibited from receiving visitors. Then, after she made her decision on how to handle the situation, an order was issued where they had to immediately and permanently leave the Queen's territory in late July. Now, after the Queen took the throne and it was known what her intentions were, which she made her intentions and her beliefs and thoughts well known of what she would accept and would not accept from the Europeans early out of the gate. It frightened a lot of the Europeans, and a lot of them left. The majority who stayed behind were those who were missionaries. They stayed behind with the hopes of being able to continue their practice. But she gave this speech to her people and the Europeans in 1835, and it goes as this, and I quote, "To the English or French strangers, I thank you for the good that you have done in my land and my kingdom, where you have made known European wisdom and knowledge. Do not worry yourselves. I will not change the customs and rights of our ancestors. Nevertheless, whoever breaks the laws of my kingdom will be put to death, whoever he may be. I welcome all wisdom and all knowledge which are good for this country. It would be a waste of time and effort to grab the customs and rights of my ancestors. Concerning religious practice, baptism, or assemblies, it is forbidden for my people who inhabit this land to take part, whether on Sunday or during the week. Concerning you, foreigners, you can practice according to your own manners and customs. Nevertheless, if skilled handiwork and other practical skills exist which can profit our people, exercise these skills that good will come. These are my instructions which I make known to you." So after she made it clear that anyone who broke her laws would be punished or face death depending on their crime, whether they were a foreigner or one of her people, the majority of the Europeans left in fear. Those who remained, who were the missionaries, stayed, trying to continue to push the word of Christianity, but she was not in support of that. So she really truly believed in the sovereignty of her people and that they should be living according to their own ways and customs and not take on the Europeans' way of thinking and living and their religion. And the other thing that she was not pleased with, that I guess I should say the missionaries were doing, is as they were converting the people, one of the things that was required, that they were making a requirement of the people to do, was that they had to repudiate their own customs and beliefs in order to accept Christianity and give them up altogether. And she was not for that, and she was not having that. So she wanted the missionaries out of the country. While she kind of welcomed them there, and she did not mind others being there if they were bringing technology and a new, industry and things that could bring money and skills to her people, she did not want them imposing on their way of life. And Christianity was one of those things that she had a big problem with. And she made a statement regarding that, and her exact words were, and I will quote, she says that Their enforcement of repudiation of their customs is, quote, the substitution of the respect of her ancestors for the respect of the ancestors of the whites, Jesus Christ. For her, the new religion was a political act, and she was actually right. It was a political act. It was being utilized to gain control of the people with the hopes of Britain being able to come in and gain control of the country as a whole. So they were using religion to take control of the country politically. And she was well aware of this. Now, in 1833, the Queen married Field Marshal Ranivalona, and Ranivalona served as the Queen's first minister from 1830 to 1832. Then he served as Prime Minister and Commander-in-Chief from 1832 to 1852. After his death, the Queen then wed Field Marshal Andrianisa, and he served as Prime Minister from 1852 to 1862. Queen Ranavalona ruled her kingdom from the Rova compound in Antananarivo, and from the years of 1839 to 1842, a new residence was built for the Queen called Manja Kamiadana, and this became the largest structure on the Rova grounds, and it was made entirely from wood and boar. And as a matter of fact, at one point, it was the largest wood structure on earth. Queen Ranavalona encouraged the introduction of new technologies and forms of knowledge from abroad. She took measures to professionalize her army, and she has supported the establishment of an industrialized economy. She also further developed a complex political bureaucracy which enabled the Marina Court to govern remote provinces across their large island. So as opposed to having to go to some of these remote areas and settle disputes in person, they could now govern, pass laws, and oversee disputes from one central location. So in essence, Queen Ranavalona put an end to most foreign trade relationships, and she pursued a policy of self-reliance, which led her country to be free of colonization and free of control from foreign powers, and they were ruling themselves without interference. In 1835, the Queen outlawed the practice of Christianity among her population. And within a year after that, almost all foreigners had left the territory, as I mentioned earlier. On August 16, 1861, Queen Ranavalona died in her sleep at her palace, and her son Ramadan II took reign. She was laid in a coffin of silver piastres in a tomb at the royal city of Ambohimanga. The Queen reigned for 33 years and successfully managed to expand her empire, make it totally independent, bring new technologies and education to her people. Yet, she has been depicted as a cruel tyrant. But the truth is, she was an astute politician who effectively protected the political and cultural sovereignty of her nation from European invaders. The Queen has been labeled as a very cruel ruler to her people, and she has been responsible for a large number of deaths. She is said to have used the traditional practice of trial by ordeal, or the tangina, and this is where poison is extracted from the nut of the tangina shrub and is ingested, and the outcome of their ingestion, whether they live or die, determined their guilt of the crime or accusation that was made against them. And it's said that Christians and Christianity was often a target. But They mentioned that without pointing out the fact that the missionaries who were there required that the people, when they accepted Christianity, that it involved them having to repudiate their ancestral customs and beliefs. And it is very important, if you are going to make some statements, that you also put context into why there are consequences to the actions of that. So, was she kind of brutal? Yes, possibly. But what were her enemies doing that led her to be so strict and so hard in certain areas? You have to look at that. The other thing we have to look at is that all stories of Queen Ranavalona have been told by outsiders, have been told by Europeans, those she have wronged, those who feared her. We have a woman who was able to take control of a country, remove all foreign interference, rule it as the sole ruler without that foreign interference, grow her territory, grow technology and education, and do all of that while at the same time successfully defeating twice her foreign adversaries and not allowing them to take control of her country. Because I did mention the one battle in 1829 that she had, but Britain and France got together for a second attack against the kingdom and the queen in 1845. And that second attempt, she successfully defeated them as well. So you have a black woman who successfully defeated what were to be two of the largest and supposedly largest and most successful military units of that time. And she did it with a smaller group of people, a smaller military. And in their eyes, that's just not supposed to happen. So she has been portrayed in somewhat of a vile way in history, when in reality she was just a strong woman who refused to be a puppet, who refused to be dominated, and who refused to allow foreigners to come in, control her, her people, their land, their resources, and dictate how they would live. She didn't just defeat one European country, she defeated two, all within her reign. And this is something in their eyes that is a no-no. And the best way to destroy a person, if you can't defeat them physically and mentally, is to destroy their character. So her story has been told by people who are not her biggest fans. And it's important when talking about some of her actions to put them in context as to why some of the things she did were done. And to even question if some of the things they say she did, if her extreme brutality is really true or not. But nevertheless, she has gone down in history as the most famous queen from Madagascar. So guys, that's it for today's video. And as always, please remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment on what you think about today's story. I'll see you soon.